Good morning and welcome to episode 6 of the Duval 22 podcast. My name is Gus Logue. Today I'm joined by Kyle Posey of Niners Nation. You can find him on Twitter/X at KP_show. Kyle, thanks so much for joining me today to preview Jaguars at Niners in week 4. How has the season treated you so far?
It's interesting as always. A team that generally gets hurt a lot
Yeah.
continues to get hurt a lot, but they're winning. So it kind of, I guess that's the silver lining. It's a bottom line business. So they're doing that. How about you? What's your take on the early Jag start?
Yeah, so far so good. I think they definitely had a disappointing loss in week 2 against the Bengals, kind of just let that one slip out of their fingers. And so it felt like a second it was just like same old Jaguars is kind of a popular saying around here. But I think week 3 showed that it's not the same old Jaguars because even though that was an ugly win, it was still a win. And so it's nice to have that kind of silver lining for sure. I think definitely all the early returns just from Liam Cohen and the coaching staff has been really positive. And honestly, Campanile, the defensive coordinator too, and so they probably should be 3-0, but can't really complain too much. So far, so good. This will definitely be the Jaguars' toughest matchup of the season so far, though I think because even if Texans have one of the best defenses in the NFL, they also have one of the worst offenses, and that was at Everbank Stadium. Now the Jaguars are going to be flying across the coast to the West Coast. And so, Kyle, let's start off on the offense side of the ball. As you mentioned already, there have been a lot of injuries, and primarily to the offensive side of the ball. Brock Purdy was limited in Wednesday's practice with shoulder and ankle or shoulder and toe injuries, and he missed each of the past 2 games. So, starting out with Brock Purdy, like, what are your expectations for him in terms of his availability? Do you think he's going to play? And if so, like, how much less effective do you think he would be compared to a fully healthy Brock?
Yeah, that is interesting because you never know with the toe injury, right? If he can't plan, if he can't run, like mobility is a big part of his game. So if he's limited to just being a drop back passer, I feel like that will take him down a tier of whatever tier that you believe he is in right now. Still though, they're getting back some pieces. So I imagine, especially at home, Kyle Shanahan's going to have a nice game plan. If he isn't mobile, I would imagine that even more means more like screens. They're going to get the ball out of his hands quickly, but just sticking to Brock specifically, he only knows one style. So regardless of if he's hurt, if he's 100% healthy, I still believe he's going to sling it around just because that's who he is at his core.
That makes sense. Now, in the off chance or in the possibility that Mac Jones does end up getting the start, obviously Jaguars fans are really familiar with him. He started a handful of games last year after Trevor Lawrence went on injured reserve. He's also a local Jacksonville kid. And so, what have you seen from him like the past 2 games? They were 2 wins, but like how much does the offense change or downgrade, I guess, if Mac Jones is the quarterback?
He's going to miss throws. That's to be expected, right? He's a backup quarterback. He's backup for a reason. But still, I thought he played really well last week. I thought against the Saints, and they are the Saints, it was more of like a scheme. It was more of Kyle Shanahan doing the work. But I think Mac made plays in the 2 minute drill last week. I think he made plays at the end of the game. Like he was a big reason why they were able to win that game. So really no complaints. I know he had an interception, but like interceptions don't really bother me. I don't think if you're not good enough to overcome an interception, one interception, you're probably not good enough to win the game. Like I think it says more about your team than it does the quarterback. But yeah, I think they couldn't have been happier with the way Mac Jones played, especially these last 2 weeks. But when they needed him in a divisional game, he came through. So I would imagine he has rave reviews in that locker room right now.
For sure. Move on to the skill position players. I mean, Christian McCaffrey, it seems like so far so good for him after a lot of just I don't know what to call the past year and a half. A lot of ups and downs, mostly downs concerning his Achilles and calf. But right now he's like one of the most heavily used running backs in the NFL. And so, do you think that that'll continue, or do you think that hypothetically the Niners would like to decrease his workload a little bit?
Honestly, that's never been the case since he's been with the 49ers. Like they're going to spam him targets. They're going to give him a bunch of carries. Like he has been pretty much the heartbeat of the offense. So, this early usage, it shouldn't be a surprise. because they've gone out of their way to get him the ball early and often in games, and that doesn't change as the game goes along. So I imagine he's going to be one of the his usage rates aren't going to change anytime soon. I guess I would say it would be a surprise if he doesn't finish this season, in the top three in carries or
Yeah,
touches, maybe, just because he's more of just as much as a receiving threat.
for sure. Well, I think more interesting is like the rest of the skill position players around him, especially considering various injuries. George Kittle is on injured reserve with a hamstring. Brandon Ayuk is still recovering from his injury last year, so he's also on injured reserve. Juwan Jennings missed last week. And so, like, who has kind of stepped up, especially because, like, Debo is no longer in the picture either now that he's playing with the Commanders. Uh, like the main guys between Ayuk, Debo Samuel, and George Kittle were kind of just like the main three guys for years. And so, what have you seen, I guess, especially from Ricky Pearsall, but just what is like the kind of amount of targets, like where are targets being distributed right now?
Ricky Pearsall, Christian McCaffrey. Ricky Pearsall, Christian McCaffrey. Like it's back and forth between those two. It seems like they are the offense. And why wouldn't they be pretty much? Pearsall's been pretty good. I would say Pearsall has been better than they would ever imagine. I know they took him in the first round, but everybody knows what happened to him last year. And still, like he's finding ways to get open. Um, he generally looks like a number one wide receiver. And they're able to sprinkle in other targets. Maybe Juwan Jennings plays this week. He was a big part of their offense in week two. So being able to get him back will make a difference. They also get Demarcus Robinson back from suspension. He was with the Rams last year. He's more of a speedy guy, but the way that he was used in training camp and in the preseason makes it seem like he is going to be a big part of the offense. So I would assume even if Jennings is in there, it would be let's say we're dividing up 10 targets. Pearsall would get six, Robinson would get four, or sorry, Robinson would get three, and Jennings would get one. I think the top two guys or that's who they want to get the ball to. And obviously, we'll see a heavy dosage of McCaffrey.
For sure. Yeah. One of my questions for you was like whether you think, assuming good health, whether Jawan Jennings or Ricky Pearsall would be like the leading receiver for the Niners for the rest of the season. But you answered my question there. Like what specifically have you seen from Pearsall that stood out? Is there like a certain area that he's improved in from year one to year two? Is there a part of his game that you're like a little bit surprised by or like kind of caught unexpected?
I'm pretty surprised, honestly, of like how often he's winning down the field. So, like he ran well at the combine. He tested well. He tested like an upper echelon athlete, but not. It doesn't always seem like those guys play that fast, but he does play that fast. And I think that's the biggest surprise, where they are consistently targeting him down the field, and he's winning. So he's catching two-thirds of his targets right now, which is pretty insane considering he has one of the highest air yards per target. So not only is he being targeted down the field, he's winning down the field. And obviously, when you can generate those explosives, it's a good sign. So it makes offense a lot easier. It takes the pressure off having to score on these 10, 12 play drives. So honestly, I think it's that. Just him being able to consistently separate and win down the field is a big shock to me. Just and not that I'm not saying I wasn't or like I don't want to say that he was going to be this underneath type of wide receiver. I just didn't expect him to be this deep threat.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, we'll certainly be looking out for that on Sunday. Last question for the offense. Just when I think most fans picture Kyle Shanahan's offense, it's wide zone runs with bootleg play action off of it, lots of motion, lots of getting the ball into his playmakers' hands, spamming the middle of the field, lots of crossing routes. Do you think that that's like still held up over the past like season or two, or are there any like specific nuances in terms of ways that Shanahan has adjusted his offense, especially considering that Brock Purdy is like a real deal and not just a Mr. Irrelevant?
I think he's gotten more aggressive in the passing game. I think he's putting more on Brock's plate in the drop back passing game. So it's not these play action. He's not hiding his quarterback, I guess is the easiest way to put it. So he's letting his quarterback play quarterback and he's letting him shine within his system. And Brock's doing that just with his aggressive nature. So the offense, it looks different, but that's really just because the quarterback's taking shots down the field and he's not settling for like the 5 yard pass. He's content Like he's hunting the big play down the field. So that's probably going to be the biggest difference. But that was the case in Jacksonville a few years ago or a couple years ago when they played too.
For sure. I similar question for the defensive side of the ball. Robert Saleh, I think most people would imagine him as like kind of like the Seattle Legion of Boom style of defense, where it's a lot of four-man pass rushes, a lot of cover three or at least one high safety structures on the back end. I feel like he did do a lot more new stuff in with the Jets in terms of like switching up coverage structures, rushing with more than four. 90% of the time. And so, what does it look like so far in his second stint in San Francisco as the defensive coordinator?
So, I mean, he has a couple of rookies playing in the secondary, and he's pretty much just figured out on the fly what he can and can't get away with, what he can and can't run, what they are comfortable doing. It's been a lot of cover three. It's been mixing in cover four and cover six. Those are pretty much the three coverages that they're relying on. Whenever they go man, they tend to get smoked a little bit. So, and he's at some point you have to run man coverage, but I think he also understands that, hey, like we're not good at this. We're not going to waste time running this. So you're going to see a heavy dosage of zone coverages. It's just a matter of what type of coverage. He does a good job of trying to confuse the quarterback. So expect a lot of zone, complex zones where he's just trying to muddy the picture against Trevor Lawrence.
Right. Yeah, I think that's probably has to be the biggest difference, especially when you think about like Jaguars fans are really familiar with Gus Bradley because he used to be the coach, but then he was also the defensive coordinator for the Colts for a long time. And Bradley would run a similar system, at least to what Saleh used to run, but like with no disguises. Like Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars knew what they were getting on pretty much every play. So definitely think the disguise rate has gone up. And I think that like the man coverage stuff is I definitely agree. Like you need to run it at some point, especially when you get to the postseason. But it's kind of a similar story in Jacksonville right now, where Campanile is running a ton of zone coverage, a lot of disguise coverages, and they haven't run a lot of man because they're just not as good at it, and they haven't really needed to run it that much. So it'll be interesting for both teams to see like once they inevitably kind of need to mix in some man coverages, whether they're able to hold up or not. Um, Obviously, the biggest injury to the Niners so far this season has been Nick Bosa. Actually, I forget what the specific injury is. Did he tear his ACL again in week
Yeah,
three?
it was the same knee. Yeah.
So Nick Bosa is going to be out for the year. How do you expect the Niners to try to fill that gap? Obviously, it's kind of falls into the category of like he's an irreplaceable player, but like are there certain like young guys on the roster that you're looking forward to seeing if they can step up? Do you think they could potentially like make a trade for a pass rusher? Because I think that's usually the most popular trade deadline deals is for pass rushers. Is Salah going to adjust his defense based on not having Nick Bosa anymore? Just how do you see the aftermath of that shaking out?
I would imagine we see a spike in the blitz rate. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. They are below average pretty much across the board, no matter what down it is when it comes to blitzing right now. But that was with Nick Bosa. Last week, after they lost Bosa, he played about 10 snaps last week. Like we saw him use multiple DBs blitzing. He would again try to muddy the picture. Maybe he's gonna drop linemen or defensive linemen into coverage, just basically try to trick you, try to con you into making a mistake. So I would imagine that's going to be the case. So a spike in blitz rate, probably more DBs coming off the edge. Um, as far as the current personnel goes, they drafted Mykel Williams, but I think they drafted him to be an interior pass rusher. So ideally, the other guys step up. They have Bryce Huff, which they traded for from the Jets. He's been really good for them so far. I don't imagine they're going to ask more from him against the run. He's pretty much a pass rush only player. Same with Gross Matos, who came over from the Panthers. He's really a pass rush only player. So I think that's where um, the real test is going to come, right? Who's going to step up on early downs? Because it doesn't matter if you can't stop the run, you're not going to be able to rush the passer. They have a guy, Sam Okowanonu, who's a really decent role player, but when you ask more from role players, like it always tends to go south, it seems like. So I would imagine they're going to use this next month to evaluate how they're going to be or how they are looking, and then that's going to determine how aggressive they are in the trade market. Everybody wants Trey Hendrickson. Everyone wants Kayvon Thibodeau. Like, of course, that would be great, but that also feels like You're going to have to part ways with some draft capital that you probably don't want to part ways with. So, would not be surprised to see them go after maybe a lesser, and lesser sounds awful, but maybe a pass rusher not on the same level as those two, like Jalen Phillips, who's in a contract year, or maybe try to find a wily old vet who's on one of these teams who aren't going anywhere. Maybe that's Cam Jordan. But like there are options out there. It's just a matter of what like the price and what they're willing to give up. So it's going to be a play it by ear, or sorry, just a wait and see type of situation, see how things unfold over the next month.
For sure. Yeah, they definitely have time to kind of like figure it out and address how big of a potential problem it is. I would love to hear more about Mykel Williams, the 11th overall pick in this year's draft out of Georgia. I've seen some pretty crazy run splits of like the Niners run defense with him in the lineup versus out of the lineup. So what has his impact been like? It's only been 3 games, but just what have you seen out of the Niners first round rookies so far?
Yeah, those splits match the eye test. The teams just can't run on the 49ers when he's on the field. I mean, they upgraded quite a bit on the defensive line just in terms of size and strength, and that's really helped them on early downs in terms of stopping the run. But yeah, Mykel, whenever the teams try to block him with a tight end, I mean, teams should never block defensive ends, especially 280 pounds with tight ends, but he wrecks them. But he's also resetting the line of scrimmage against guards. He's winning against tackles. He's holding his own on double teams. He's doing things that pretty much no player aside from Eric Armstead, who you guys know, has done outside of Nick Bosa, of course, but like they haven't had a run defender as good as Mykel since Eric Armstead, who was like a popular comp in 49ers land, but he's pretty much lived up to this high draft pick billing. And it's only been 3 games, but he's shown flashes. He's shown progress. He's starting to win more as a pass rusher, which is encouraging. I think now it's just about speeding up. But where he's at in 3 games, the way he's progressed, the way he's growing up on the flies, it has to be encouraging. Like he genuinely looks like a top 10 type of player. So that's not always the case. And to be able to see it's this early is about as encouraging as it gets.
Yeah, he will definitely be a player to watch for on Sunday. Are there any other players that you would say like Jaguars fans should watch out for, especially on the defensive side, considering like Hufanga went to the Broncos in the offseason. So did Jake Greenlaw. Charvarius Ward went to the Colts. And so they had a little bit of roster turnover, specifically on defense. So any other guys, offense or defense, that you just think Jaguars fans should be familiar with going into the game?
The 49ers have a really, really good linebacker next to Fred Warner. The national media would make it seem like it was a downgrade when they lost Dre Greenlaw. I didn't think it was at the time, and it's kind of playing out that way. So D Winters is the guy who plays next to Warner, and he's a baller, man. He's just as fast as can be, plays kind of reckless style, but that's what you need to at linebacker. And he always seems to be around the ball, whether it's against the run, against the pass. So their linebacker duo has significantly upgraded, I would say. He needs to stay healthy, but Winters is the man at linebacker for sure.
Gotcha. Now, you did mention Fred Warner, who I haven't even brought up. It seems like if the season were like ending today, he would be one of the top picks to win Defensive Player of the Year. Like he's always been great, or at least for the past several years, always been great. But it seems like he's just on a different level this season. Would you say that like there's a specific like extra step that he's taken, or is it just like he's making plays on a more consistent basis? Has like his role in the defense changed because of the change in defense coordinators? Like, is there a specific reason that you can point to for Fred Warner having an even better season than he usually does? Or is it just like there's not really an obvious answer and you guys are just kind of sitting back and enjoying?
No, I actually the more I think about your question, I've been thinking about this. I just think it's the way that they've upgraded the defensive line.
Mm,
So he's not playing behind pass rush first defensive tackles. He's not playing behind 280-pound defensive tackles. He's playing behind 280-pound edge rushers now in Mykel Williams. He's playing with guy like Alfred Collins, our second round pick, is 335 pounds. So he's clean, like he's protected. And the defensive line winning provides Warner clean runways to get to the running back. So he's making a lot more plays. And obviously, he's always going to make plays in the passing game. But basically, just being covered by these large humans up front is going a long way for him making plays. So I got to give credit to the D tackles and the guys up front.
for sure. That makes a lot of sense. To kind of move it forward to specifically the Jaguars game, Jaguars at Niners in Week 4. Is there a specific matchup that you're looking forward to that interests you, or or that you think could dictate the game, whether it's a specific player versus specific player, certain unit versus unit, etc.?
Ricky Pearsall and Tyson Campbell.
Hmm.
Um, I loved Campbell coming out of college. I know like he's been prone to getting beat deep in the pros, and that's probably been the case every year he's been in. But I would imagine if Pearsall can get over on him one or two times, that could be the difference in the game, honestly. So like those two going head to head, whoever wins that matchup is going to be probably going to win the game. I would imagine on the other side of the ball too, though, like if the 49ers are able to stop Brian Thomas, if Brian Thomas catches the ball or pretends like he wants to go over the middle and catches the ball, I would imagine that matchup is equally as important. I am interested to see what they do with Travis Hunter, like if it's going to be kind of like these dink and dunk underneath routes, or if they're actually going to let him throw the ball to him down the field. The 49ers secondary, they've had some busts, some coverage busts on deep plays too. They've been fortunate by either drops or just bailed out by the offense, but there have been plays to be had against his secondary, and I think like Thomas and Hunter are the types of receivers to get over on them or that can beat them. So I know the game is won on the line of scrimmage, blah blah blah, but I think those two matchups, Thomas, and not just against one specific corner, but just getting the chunk play in general, and then on the other side with Pearsall and Campbell.
For sure, that makes a lot of sense. I'm definitely interested to see if Trevor Lawrence can kind of reignite his deep ball because it hasn't really been there all season, but especially in week 3, he was 0 for 4 on passes of like 20 plus yards downfield, and none of them were even really catchable. And so that's definitely one of the things that he needs to work on improving in the near future. And so it would be really big, like even less so like for Trevor to rekindle that, and more so just for Brian Thomas to get back in the groove, and then for Travis Hunter to actually be deployed downfield. Because I agree with you, like it's been a lot of choice routes. It's been a couple of screens in week 1, a lot of just underneath targets, and it would be nice to see his route tree expanded a little bit. But at the same time, like he's also splitting his time in meetings and practice and such on the defensive side of the ball. So it certainly makes sense that the Jaguars kind of ramping up his workload a little bit. Uh, that's really all the questions I had for you, Kyle. I appreciate you joining again. Feel free to ask me any questions that you're curious about for the matchup, or offer a final score prediction, or just get any other takes off your chest that you're thinking about ahead of this week 4 game.
I feel like this is going to be kind of a wild game, man. I feel like it's going to, like, the score is going to look a lot like the Jaguars Bengals, where maybe it's first to 30 wins. The
Mm,
total on the game is 46 and a half, and I think that's low. So you mentioned Trevor going 0 for 4 down the field. It's not like they were cut, like they were open. I was watching the game, like he had
yeah.
dudes open. It's been like that in the 49ers case too. Like Pearsall has been open on these deep plays. That I read a stat where the Jaguars line is basically leading the league in yards before contact for ETN. And the way that the secondary for the 49ers has been tackling, if ETN makes a guy miss, like he's off to the races. So I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities for both teams to score. It's just a matter of can they take advantage, right? Can you actually complete those passes? The one screen to McCaffrey, ETN, are they going to be able to break it? So, like, I think we're going to be in for a relatively high scoring matchup. Maybe not 31-27, but I think it's going to be in the higher 20s. What are you expecting here?
Yeah, I think that like the Jaguars have leaned a lot on their defense for takeaways. They lead the league with 9 this year, and they only recorded 8 takeaways on defense last year. And so if you take away the takeaways, like they're still a good above average defense, but I think they're obviously relying on that a lot. And so I'm interested to see like if they get 0 or 1 takeaways, what exactly does the defense look like, especially if they're kind of having to stay on the field longer, if or if they're not in like beneficial game scripts, because I think the Jaguars have actually only trailed for 18 total seconds this whole season, and so that's been beneficiary to the defense. I don't think that like they're frauds or anything, and they're actually like a bottom 10 unit, and it's just a matter of time until they get exposed. But with that said, I think that maybe they could get a little bit more exposed more than they have, especially with like there being 3 weeks of tape out on Campanile's defense. He runs a lot of similar stuff to Todd Halfley because he was in Green Bay as a linebackers coach in the past. Also kind of similar to like Brian Flores because he also coached under Flores. So just a lot of like mugged up fronts, a lot of just aggressive alignments, tons of disguises. And so fortunately, they haven't had really any coverage busts that I can think of, which is really impressive for it being a new staff and there's two new safeties starting. But I kind of feel like it's a matter of time. I certainly wouldn't be surprised if they end up allowing a chunk play or three in one of their next few games. And I don't really have any reason to doubt that it would be the Niners, even if it is Mac Jones who ends up drawing the start. And so I do think for the Jaguars offense, they kind of need the deep ball to start clicking, especially in this game, because you're right that like if ETN breaks a tackle, then like he could get going and eat up yards. But with Mykel Williams playing the way that he's playing, I think that the Jaguars kind of benefited from an early slate of defenses in the first 2 weeks, and so their offensive line has been like probably the biggest like pleasant surprise of the season so far. But I feel like their play might end up regressing a little bit, especially with just the attrition of the season. And so we'll see. It's certainly like, I mean, for Liam Cohen, it's his first year as head coach, and so like last week was his biggest test to date, and then this week will be his biggest test to date, and then after that, his biggest test will be hosting the Chiefs on Monday Night Football, and so he's got a lot to prove throughout the season. But this is definitely going to be one of those games where I think we learn a lot about the Jaguars for sure, and so I'm looking forward to it. Kyle, thank you again for joining, man. It's been a blast. Definitely learned a lot. Check out Kyle on Twitter/X at KP_show and his work at NinersNation.com. Shout out SB Nation. Kyle, any other thoughts before we get out of here?
No, man, I think we're in for an exciting one. Appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, man. All right, till next time. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. I'll be back on Monday for a recap of this Jaguars at Niners Week 4 matchup. So thanks again for everyone. Bye bye.